Yeah. I mean, to your point, and I'll talk about the employer first, there's an astronomical economic issue. You mentioned $90,000 domestically. It's closer to $300,000 on average internationally, closer to $1 million if it's an executive. And a third of people will quit their job within a year or move back home because of their and their family's inability to socially acclimate, to your point. And the main reason why this is, and why no one I don't think has really taken shape to tackle it before us, is that what we found was that 90% of Fortune 1000 companies outsource all of their relocation needs to relocation management companies. But they're tasked with moving you and your things from A to B, really handling the logistics. So, that immigration, all of that. And then what happens after that is their KPIs expire and the companies say, good luck. And what happens after the fact is, retention issues, productivity issues. And then to get back to your point on what that looks like for the actual employee is, 65% of those relocations will actually fail, not because the employee didn't acclimate, but because the partner's spouse or the family members had trouble doing so. And that is so often left out of the mix. And so, that could mean that people aren't, making friends in school, or they're choosing the wrong neighborhoods because they aren't informed, or a lot of times they don't know the answers to the questions they don't know to ask, and they get there and they're really confused, and their world is turned upside down. And so there are a lot of systemic ways and reasons why this has never been looked at before. What Pivot has done through its inception is a lot of education on why this matters, not just to the employee, but back to the bottom line of the business. Um, because it does make an astronomical impact, not just on the companies, on the employees and their families, but also the cities that they're getting to and then potentially leaving.
Yeah, and that just it trickles into sort of everything, I think, especially the things that Peter is trying to solve and what Kyle's trying to solve on his ends. Kyle, you spent the earliest, part of your career in New York City. And then, you came back and your family's been always a big supporter, but you really dove in not only in the real estate and development, but you've taken bets on emerging technologies. You've supported us in backing early stage founders. Why was it the right time? And what did you see in Buffalo that said, I'm going to leave the big city and I'm coming home and going to put my, flag in the ground here to grow it.
I actually I referenced this in a post on 43 North when it came out that this would be their last year, but it was really like year two or three when I came back home from came back home from New York to Buffalo to go to my first 43 North event. And the vibrancy that I felt, and I think Pete, you were probably working there at the time. The vibrancy that I felt and the difference that I felt with young people started to they started staying here. And it wasn't because you got a job in M&T or one of our five major law firms. Like that's the only way anyone would ever stay here otherwise. But they're staying here and they're working in places where they're wearing jeans and t-shirts. And it was like, oh man, like maybe I should actually think about moving back here fairly soon. This could be somewhere where I actually could fit in and have a fun, vibrant life like I had in New York. And then, 4, 5, 6 years later, continue to think about it and continue to really just I had such a great childhood here. I think that's why a lot of us come back. We think what an amazing childhood. We all have great friends from Buffalo. We want our kids to have the same thing. So that was really the trigger that really ultimately kept me always looking. But I think it was the growth of the tech scene and the diversification of the employment within the city that ultimately made me feel like we're moving forward as a city and that I want to be a part of it. And it's nice to be have success in New York and make money, but in Buffalo, you can actually see change. You can see the change that you're making, and that's the motivation behind it.
And Peter, I'm sure if we could copy and paste Kyle a few times, your life and job would be a little bit easier. But
Yeah.
how does it impact you when you see people like Kyle and his family, putting real capital in here, and how does that actually start to change the optimism and the thinking of the city when you see people come back and say, I'm writing that check and I'm going to put, real effort behind this.
It's really powerful. And I think at the heart of all this is us willing to be able to, being willing to take risks on behalf of downtown in the city in our region. And I have a great deal of appreciation for the work that Kyle and his dad and their company have put into our downtown core and to the startup ecosystem, which, Kyle, alluded to that I was, did work in for a dozen years before taking on this role. And I think that there's actually uh, some neat tie-ins here that I think between, like what our future of the city is and the future of downtown is, and also an entrepreneurial mindset. Because I think when we were first launching 43 North, back in the beginning of 2014, Buffalo had lost some of its, entrepreneurial identity that was really at the root of this city in its earliest days and through a big chunk of its history. And we'd become much more risk adverse than served us well. Um, and I think, it's understandable when I think back to like my parents' generation and them living through some of the largest employers of this region shutting down, like the steel mills um, and folks moving away. That's a traumatic experience to see your friends and family members lose their jobs and move away. And that I think our region had a choice at the time